This was a very big and scary moment for Prince Harry. His reputation is how people think of him, and right now, people are not sure if they can believe him. He was in a special place in the courtroom called the dock. He was having a big argument with a judge. Today, the judge said that Harry's claims against a newspaper were not good enough. The judge threw them out of court. Harry had said there was a secret deal, but the judge did not agree. Now, Harry is back in London for another big court case. He is fighting against a group that owns newspapers. People say he was trying to fight back very hard. Then something happened. Only 11 words were read out loud. The room was very quiet. When those 11 words were heard, Harry's whole world seemed to break apart. First, his hands started to shake a little bit. Then his face started to move and he began to cry very hard. This was not the kind of crying people do for a movie. It was the kind of crying you do when you are really, truly hurt deep inside. These 11 words were very mean. They were not just about him. They were like a set of rules on how to control him. Over the next 4 hours, many more things came out of that room. No one was ready for how sad and serious it would be for the Windsor family. The lawyers wanted to change the way Harry was protected by security, but the main part of the story is those 11 words. They were read on a very cold morning in London. Every single person in that room stopped moving. There were lawyers who have seen many bad things. There were news writers who have been to wars. There were even artists who draw pictures of the court. All of them were shocked. The message was very simple but very cold. It's said to make Harry cry when he talks about his mother, Princess Diana. That was the secret instruction. When those words were said, the room felt very cold. It felt like the air left the room. These words were so powerful that they changed how everyone saw Harry. It wasn't just a tiny bit uncomfortable. It was the kind of thing that makes you rethink everything you thought was true about a person. Harry was not just a prince anymore. He looked like a man who had been tricked in a very mean way. Harry was not sitting there like he expected bad news. He walked into the court with his back straight. He looked like a soldier because he used to be one. He looked very strong, like a man who has been through hard times and survived. Everyone was looking at him. The reporters were taking notes and the lawyers had all their papers ready. It seemed like it would be a normal day. But then Judge Thornberry read that one line. Harry's face changed first. His jaw moved just a tiny bit. If you weren't looking closely, you might have missed it, but people were watching him very carefully. Then his hands, which were sitting on his knees, started to turn into tight fists. He wasn't being dramatic. It was like his body was feeling the pain before his brain could even understand it. His knuckles turned white because he was squeezing so hard. Then his face changed completely. The face that everyone sees on magazines and TV looked different. It wasn't a smile for the public anymore. It was a face full of real, deep pain. For a long time, the world saw Harry waving from the palace balconies with the other Windsors. But in that courtroom, his face twisted into something very sad. This had nothing to do with how he wanted to look for the cameras. This was just pure hurt. We have to remember that Princess Diana was not just a famous lady to Harry. She was his mother. Losing her was like a big wound that never healed. He has been sad about her since he was only 12 years old. He had to stand in front of the whole world and try to understand why his mom was gone. He has carried that sadness into everything he does. He talks about it in therapy and in big interviews. That grief is the most real thing about him. It is the one part of his life that he thought was private and safe. He thought nobody could touch those feelings. He was arriving at the court hoping for justice, but instead he found out something terrible. Those 11 words suggested that his sadness was being used. It felt like someone had studied his pain and written it down as a tool to be used at the right time for a TV show. The people in the courtroom had heard many hard stories before. The news writers had seen scandals and disasters that would make most people stay awake at night. But these 11 words were different. Even the artist who was drawing stopped their pencil. The message was not loud or angry, it was just very cold and factual. That made it even worse. This was not just a rumor or a story in a mean newspaper. This was a private message written by someone Harry knew. It was read out loud for everyone to hear. At first, Harry tried to stay strong. Watching him was very interesting. He sat in the witness box exactly how you would expect a royal prince to sit. He was very still and controlled. His back was very straight and he looked forward. This is the kind of stillness you have to practice for a long time. The room was busy with lawyers and papers and the judge was talking in a calm voice. Harry sat through it like he was ready for anything. But on this cold morning, the silence felt very dangerous. Then came that specific line about his mother. Harry's face began to change. His jaw twitched again. Most people might not have noticed, but the people watching closely saw it happen. His hands were flat on his knees, but then they started to curl up. One by one, his fingers folded into tight fists. His knuckles were totally white. The face that the whole world thought it knew was changing right in front of them. Something was breaking inside him. He didn't look like the version of Harry we see on TV. He put his head down slowly. He looked like he wanted to become very small so no one could see him. It felt like if he could just stay quiet and still, the bad moment would go away. He looked like he had grown 10 years older in just 30 minutes, but the judge had more to read. She moved on to the newest messages. Harry covered his face with both of his hands and then he started to sob. It was a deep sound that he could not stop. His body was letting out the pain because his mind could not hold it anymore. When Harry started to cry, the room went very still. The artist stopped drawing and a reporter put down her pen. Even people who are used to seeing others in pain found themselves frozen. Harry's lawyer stood up quickly. His voice was very urgent. He asked the judge if they could take a break. He said his client was very upset and needed a moment alone. But the judge said no. She said the hearing must keep going. This was very shocking to the people in the room. Even the judge's voice sounded different. It was thinner and not as steady. Even she was affected by the sadness in front of her. Outside the room, things were very messy. It wasn't the normal quiet of a court building. It was a heavy kind of silence. Reporters were already using their phones to type the news. Everything had changed in just a few minutes. Inside, Harry stayed in the witness box. His face was red and his eyes were swollen. His hands would not stop shaking. Message after message was read out loud. They all sounded very cold. Together, they told a story that was almost impossible to look at for 4 long hours. The most important thing was that these messages were never supposed to be public. They were private notes written between Meghan and a friend she trusted very much. This friend was from her old life in California. She had known this person since she was an actress. This was long before she had a royal title or cameras following her everywhere. This was not just someone she knew a little bit. This was a best friend that she told everything to. It was the kind of friendship where you say things you would never say to anyone else. It was a deep trust that took years to build. But that friend had given all the messages to the court. Just finding out that a friend betrayed you is enough to hurt anyone. But what was in the messages made it even harder. The courtroom felt like it was falling apart. It happened in one single sentence. Those 11 words were so cold and planned that they felt like a knife. What made this so hard to hear was not just the broken friendship. It was what the messages said about the real Meghan. The things she said to her friend were very different from the person the public sees. The world saw a woman who was overwhelmed and struggling, but the messages showed someone who was always thinking many steps ahead. They showed someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She was like a strategist or a person making a big plan for a brand. She was doing it with a lot of precision. This really shocked the people in the room because they thought they had heard everything already. And right in the middle of this big plan was Harry. He wasn't a partner making choices with her. He was the main part of her plan. He was the most important piece of a very careful story she was building. The judge had even warned everyone that morning that the news would be very uncomfortable to hear. The messages showed a pattern of behavior that was very planned out. It was about controlling what news came out and how people felt about it. The judge read the messages in a steady, clinical voice, but nothing about it felt normal. What hit people the hardest was that Harry was hearing this for the very first time. He was sitting right there in the room, finding out these secrets at the same time as everyone else. He hadn't been told these things before. He didn't have time to prepare his heart. Do you remember the big opera interview? Everyone does. Harry sat there and talked about feeling trapped. He said the palace was a system that made him feel like he couldn't breathe. It felt like a very honest moment. People thought he was finally telling the truth about how he felt. But now the private messages showed that the interview was being directed like a movie. There were notes on what to say and how to act. The messages went through the opera interview like a director giving notes on a film. They looked at every line to see what worked and what didn't. They even talked about how to change things for the next time they were on TV. One note said that the line about being trapped in the system worked well. It said that next time, Harry should wait longer before saying he couldn't call his grandmother. It said he needed to give the moment space to breathe. This is very sad because it shows that a wife wasn't just supporting her husband. It shows a performance being fixed. It was about making the audience feel a certain way. Whole parts of their interviews were actually written down in scripts. There were handwritten notes in the corners of the papers. They said things like breathe here for emotion or look down and rub your fingers when you talk about your brother. Every movement was planned in advance. Most people who watched those interviews had no reason to think they were fake. Harry's voice broke at the right time and he looked down at the right time. He looked like a man who was really sad. But now, hearing those notes read out loud, it didn't look like real feelings anymore. It looked like he was being told what to do. Harry knew it too. You could see his posture change in the room. He was fighting with the British press again. His back was straight when they started, but then it began to curve. He looked like something very heavy was pushing down on his shoulders. He rubbed his face so hard that it left red marks on his cheeks. His lawyer tried to talk to him, but Harry didn't even turn his head. He just stared far away. He looked like a man trying to figure out which of his own memories were real and which were part of a script. After 2 hours, things had changed a lot. The judge had to stop and tell Harry how to act as a witness. The feeling in the room was very heavy. It was hard to breathe. Harry was not the same man who walked in that morning. His strength was gone. Everyone knew they were seeing something they would never forget. Then the judge read the next message. It said that Harry still wanted the approval of the Windsors. The message called him pathetic but said his feelings could be used. It said his guilt over his mother made him easy to control. Someone in the back of the room gasped. There was a long silence. Harry didn't cry this time. He didn't cover his face. He just closed his eyes and opened them slowly. The light in his eyes seemed to go out. It looked like the thing holding him together had finally broken. The earlier messages were very painful. Finding out your sadness was a tool is a terrible thing, but this message was different because it wasn't about a moment in time. It was about who Harry is as a person. The courtroom was silent as the judge read these private words. They described how he worked and how he could be steered in a certain direction. It wasn't describing a mistake he made. It was describing his heart as a map of weak spots. His need for love and his sadness were just things to be used. His security guards were watching him the whole time. One officer stepped forward a little bit. Another held a water bottle ready. They were watching him like he might fall down. A palace worker said Harry looked like a man who had forgotten how to even be in his own body. He looked like he didn't know how to sit or breathe anymore. When the judge asked if he needed a break, Harry just nodded his head slowly. He looked like he had no more choices to make. His lawyer said he wasn't well. Harry couldn't even stand up by himself. His security team had to hold him on both sides and walk him out of the room. He looked like he had been hit very hard. They walked him down the hallway, away from the cameras. He was going away from the people who just watched him find out the truth about his life. 30 minutes later, he came back. His jacket was hanging off him and his eyes were red. He moved very slowly. One of his lawyers tried to give him a notepad, but he didn't take it. He just sat down and waited. The next morning, the room was full again. It felt like walking through a house that had been destroyed. The judge talked about 3 categories: money, family, and Harry's inner world. The first part was about money. It showed exactly which sad stories were used to make money. Diana's memory was called a halo that made everything look good. William was used to keep the drama alive. Catherine and Charles were also part of the plan. Their Netflix deal was just a way to get a big pension. The most shocking part was about trauma fatigue. It meant they had to be careful not to tell too many sad stories too fast or people would get bored. They even used their children, Archie and Lilibet, to sell things. They had plans for toys and books using the kids' names. They said they didn't run from scandals, they used them to get more attention. What looked real to the public was actually just a calendar of things to post. It made the whole Windsor family look like a business project. The second part was about the family. This part was very mean. William was called a threat because he was strong and hard to read. Catherine was called an uncrackable mask. Meghan was frustrated because Catherine never lost her cool in public. There were very harsh words about Catherine that were too mean to say out loud. Charles was seen as someone who could be used because he felt guilty about the past. They thought they could make him soften the story if they pulled on his heartstrings. Then there were notes about how the kids should look and what titles they should have. The 2 young children were just parts of a plan to make the couple look better. The room was very quiet. The third part was the hardest for Harry. It was about his secret thoughts and things he said in therapy. Meghan had written about Harry's nightmares. She wrote about him seeing his mother's face before her car crash. She told her friend that this could be a powerful story to use. His fear of helicopters and his shame were all written down to see what they were worth. Then came the message that made everyone hold their breath. Harry said he missed his brother, William. Meghan told her friend that she told Harry his feelings were just a memory and not real. She said she had to redirect him fast because he was drifting back to his family. This shows she was steering him away from the people he loved. She told him his love for his family was a vulnerability that would ruin their plans. Harry sat totally still. He didn't move or cry. He was just present in his body but gone in his mind. In that stillness, everyone realized the truth. This wasn't just about a marriage falling apart, it was about a cold machine. Harry had been inside that machine without even knowing it. When the court was over for the day, news moved very fast. The king's house sent out a very careful message. It said it was a hard time and should be kept private. But behind closed doors, King Charles was very sad. He wasn't angry. He told his workers not to be happy or mean about what happened. He said this was not about revenge. It was just a very heavy situation. Charles was most hurt by the image of his son finding out that his pain was being used as a strategy. William was very angry. He was mad that Harry let this happen to their family. He was very upset about the mean things said about Catherine. Within a few hours, the news was everywhere. In England, people changed their minds about Harry and Meghan very fast. Their popularity went down a lot. People who had defended them for years had nothing left to say. In America, the morning shows were also talking about the messages. Psychologists were explaining how the language was used to control Harry. The tone went from liking the couple to being very worried about them. The newspapers wrote about how the couple betrayed the public who believed their story. Social media was full of people deleting their old posts of support. Big companies started to pull away. One boss said they bought a book about a life, not a manual on how to manipulate people. Deals that were about to happen were stopped. Nobody wanted to be connected to the drama right now. Harry said nothing in public. He was somewhere private, away from all the noise. He had been inside a fake story for a long time, and now he had to face the truth. Mental health experts said Harry was going through something very hard. It was like his whole reality was dissolving. Every time he thought he was being honest, someone else was actually taking notes on how to use him. This is not just a broken heart, it is a much bigger loss. The palace had seen small parts of this coming for years. William had said that Harry spoke differently. Charles said he didn't recognize his son's voice anymore. They hoped Harry would see it himself, but he found out in the most brutal way. Now Harry has to decide what to do. He can stay, he can start over, or he can go back to the Windsors. Charles said the door is always open for his son. A father doesn't have the same rules as a palace. Harry is now trying to figure out who he really is.